This is the story of the house that Henry built, or more accurately, the house that two Henrys built. Pioneering industrialist Henry Ford came here to Bryan County, Georgia in the mid-1920s, buying up more than 70,000 acres of piney South Georgia land. Ford's sprawling holdings included a few dozen pre-Civil War plantations, the site of the former Richmond on Ogeechee plantation, and before that an earlier plantation named Dublin, stood out above the rest. Situated on a bluff in a bend in the Great Ogeechee, this spot offered breathtaking views of the meandering river. It was truly an incredible location. Famed landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, the designer of New York City's Central Park and the gardens at the Biltmore Estate, once stumbled upon the spot and later wrote, "I stopped my horse, bowed my head, and held my breath. I have hardly in all my life seen anything so impressively grand and beautiful." Ford arrived 7 decades after General William T. Sherman's Union troops destroyed the old mansion that once stood here, so the 20th century pioneer would have to look elsewhere to find his own plantation home. Ford found what he was looking for 20 miles away on the south bank of the Savannah River, at the old Hermitage Plantation. Here, another industrialist named Henry, surnamed McAlpin, built one of Savannah's most beloved plantation homes around 1820. It was on this plantation where slaves used local river clay to create famous Savannah gray bricks, and the horse-drawn railway McAlpin built to move the bricks around on the site is considered to be America's first railroad. The old Hermitage Mansion was abandoned and in disrepair by the early 1930s, and the entire site was threatened by industrial development. Henry Ford made a deal with authorities in 1935 to acquire the mansion itself for $10,000, with a promise that he would move the bricks to his property in Bryan County and rebuild the house. Ford hired prominent Savannah architect Cletus Bergen to oversee the work. Completed in 1939, the resulting structure is a 6,900 square foot home boasting a drawing room, library, kitchen, 6 bedrooms, an elevator, and commercial-grade stainless steel appliances. Ford called the place Richmond Hill, and it reflected his wife Clara's fascination with a storybook version of antebellum Southern society.
Clara Ford was totally enamored of the book and then later the movie Gone with the Wind, and this was her attempt to try and create her version of that Southern narrative.
Clara's tastes were evident in the dining room, which featured landscape mural wallpaper, custom scallop-shell china cabinets in the corners, and Chippendale tables and chairs. Clara even commissioned a 1/12 scale model to help plan the furnishings for the house. Clara also adorned the surrounding landscape with beautiful flowering plants, and an ornate garden gate led to her prized roses. Though the mansion and grounds were grand, they were still understated, in keeping with the Ford's no-nonsense Midwestern mentality. One local man remembered, "Mr. Ford did not care for elaborate things, just simple beauty." Like its predecessor at the Hermitage, the Ford's new mansion boasted a front porch with imposing and elaborate Greek columns of an order known as Tower of the Winds. But contrary to what most people expected at the time, and what many still believe today, Ford did not simply move the Hermitage Mansion brick by brick to Bryan County. Instead, he and Clara instructed Bergen to design a new house that was evocative of the original structure, but was in reality a much different building.
As you can see from this perspective, the Richmond Hill Plantation is not an identical copy or replica of the original Hermitage.
In order to fully understand the scope of Bergen's changes to the Hermitage Mansion, architectural historian Robin Williams compared Bergen's original plans, housed at the archives of the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, with drawings of the Hermitage Mansion completed a few years before its dismantling.
Well, this is a set of original ink on linen drawings by the architect Cletus Bergen, who did the design for what he called Richmond Plantation, and he's marked on the drawings residence for Mr. and Mrs. Henry Ford, and he dated them July 1st, 1936.
Bergen's drawings reveal that the Ford's mansion is much bigger than Henry McAlpin's original home.
The whole of the Hermitage Plantation house could fit inside this area of the Richmond Plantation with room to spare. In fact, these areas that extend out about 11 feet on either side would be well beyond the original Hermitage.
Presumably at Clara's direction, Bergen doubled the Hermitage Mansion's single main story into 2 stories at Richmond Hill. He also moved the entrance hallway, which had been offset at the Hermitage, into dead center.
Bergen moved it into a much more conventional central hall location, as you can see on the drawing.
In addition to the mansion, Ford's plantation included a yacht basin where he docked his 28-foot cabin cruiser Little Lulu, and even a custom-built oyster house where the industrialist hosted parties for his friends. A tongue-in-cheek sign hung over the entrance.
Henry had the sign created as kind of a joke for his northern friends who would always comment, "What are you doing down in backwards Georgia?" So he created the sign, which is Georgia spelled backwards.
The mansion was also the scene of festive gatherings when the Fords were in town. Students from Ford's community school danced on the grounds, sometimes accompanied by musicians Ford brought down from Michigan. The Fords only enjoyed the mansion for 11 short years. Henry passed away on April 7, 1947, just a few days after returning home to Michigan. Clara died 3 years later. The mansion, along with 70,000 acres of land and all the other Ford-era buildings in town, was sold to International Paper Company for $5 million. The house and surrounding land passed through several other hands throughout the 1960s and 70s, with grand plans for its development as a golf resort falling through for various reasons. Over the ensuing years, the property fell into disrepair and was visited by groups of teenagers searching for adventure. Ironically, one of them was Cletus Bergen, grandson of the Ford's architect who designed the house.
It was deserted. And when we walked up to the house was, all the windows were broken, and there was dust everywhere, and wallpaper peeling off the walls and hanging down, and the doors were wide open. And the wind would blow through the house, and the curtains were coming out of the busted, broken windows, and it's like a haunted house back then.
When Bergen's sister Kathleen and a group of her friends snuck into the mansion a few years later, they had a terrifying encounter with Clara Ford's dining room wallpaper.
And then we heard behind us, and we all froze. We were even too scared to turn around and look. And we looked, we're sure it was a ghost. The wallpaper was coming down in full sheets right at our feet. And we took off. We ran. I'll never forget that sound.
For about 1 year in the late 1970s, a St. Simon's company operated a restaurant out of the mansion. Cletus Bergen and his wife Deanne dined there on more than one occasion.
Well, it was nice. I remember the food being good. It was nice, and there were always a lot of folks here. I mean, people enjoyed coming here.
It was an unexpected savior from overseas who brought Henry Ford's mansion back from obscurity. Saudi Arabian billionaire Gaith Faraone purchased the property in 1981, along with 1,800 acres. Faraone restored the mansion inside and out, replacing more than 500 broken window panes. He also left his own stamp on the estate, installing ornamental iron gates rescued from a mansion in New Orleans, as well as a large swimming pool with the bottom painted black to match the river. Faraone commissioned renowned golf course designer Pete Dye to create an 18-hole course for $11 million. As word of the new owner's garish opulence spread, the Ford plantation became known locally as the Faraone Zone. But the only peek locals got inside the exclusive mansion was from media coverage of several fancy parties Faraone hosted, attended by famous politicians and movie stars. Julia Jones-Williams, a society reporter for the Savannah Morning News, attended several of the parties in the 1980s.
Dr. Faraone greeted us. Big cigar in hand, custom suit, the best of everything here in the house. Best food, the best wines, everything. He was very proud of his wealth, his collections, and He enjoyed sharing it with people, his business associates.
In the end, Ferrone would reign over the Richmond Hill plantation just a little less time than Henry Ford himself, about 10 years. In late 1991, Ferrone and 2 of his associates were indicted on fraud and racketeering charges related to their role in an international banking scandal. Ferrone remains at large overseas and is one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. In 1998, Sterling Bluff Associates of South Carolina purchased the house and surrounding acreage for a reported $47 million. They developed the property into a 400-home private community called the Ford Plantation. The Yacht Basin and Oyster House remain as reminders of the estate's original owners. Henry and Clara Ford's mansion is the centerpiece of the development and is used today for club meetings, wine dinners, weddings, and more.
Oh, it's breathtaking. Every time I come in the front door, I am overwhelmed by the sense of history that this house holds. You walk in, and to the right you'll see the library, and you can just imagine that Henry and Clara Ford spent their days here relaxing and reading. And you come into the main living room, and we know that that the Fords hosted all kinds of events here. And you can just imagine it in your mind every time you come in the house. And I think that she would be so happy to know that we have kept her home as a home. And all of our members think of this as their home, and they share it with friends and neighbors who come to visit.